incredibly uncomfortable. But when COVID hit, obviously you could leave your house from time to time if you wanted to, whereas on the ocean, there was nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. So what I found was mentally, I needed to start looking for positives wherever I could. What we did was we initiated this exercise where we would each day in our rowing pairs, we would talk about what our daily highlight was. So something every day that made us smile or made us laugh or was just a little bit different to the other monotonous sort of 2-hour shifts that we went through. And it was just that exercise that we started getting into of looking for a positive every day, just constantly looking for those positives. And I think that was something that happened during COVID. You know, we were all forced into this unknown situation. During lockdown, we couldn't leave the house. You know, everyone was challenged in different ways. And I found myself making myself look for the positive every day. And I think there's something to be said for celebrating little successes wherever you can, rather than concentrating on negatives. So not only did that happen out in the ocean, but also during COVID, that was also a tool that I brought with me.
Hello and welcome to Say Hi to the Future, a podcast aimed at highlighting the human side of human ingenuity, clever, inventive, and original thinking. My name is Ken Tenser, CEO of SpyderWorks. With me today is Natalia Cohen, international public speaker and mindset coach. She has spent most of her life traveling the world, living, working, and exploring in close to 70 countries. Like this video if you enjoy our show and subscribe to our channel. Leave us a comment with who we should interview next. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the show. Natalia, welcome to Say Hi to the Future.
Hi, Ken. Lovely to be here.
So it says that for the last 20 years, you've lived and worked in over 70 countries. How did you even get around that quickly, and what brought you to that?
Yeah, Ken, travel was just something that I became incredibly passionate about from a very young age. In fact, I was born in South Africa and I moved to the UK when I was 5 years old. And I almost feel like that bug and passion and inspiration to travel sort of entered into me at that young age, really at 5 years old. So I grew up in the UK. And I just always had this longing to explore, really, and to learn about the world and different places and different cultures. And so as soon as I finished studying, I decided to spend a year in Australia on a working visa. And that was really my first exploration into solo travel and entering a very unknown world. I chose Australia because when you're from the UK, you get a year's opportunity in either Australia or New Zealand. And Australia was the one that I chose. And that year really opened my eyes to solo travel and to the opportunities that are out there and the ability to go somewhere and love it and stay, or go somewhere different, and just the wonderful world that there is. And that's definitely inspired the bug for travel. So because I had this passion for it, when I came back from Australia, I settled into London, tried to make some money. And then instead of thinking, what career do I want? The first question I asked myself was, what am I passionate about? And travel was always up there as the number one thing that I was passionate about. And I'm not sure if have you heard of Ikigai?
I haven't.
It's a Japanese philosophy, which I discovered only a couple of years ago, actually. And Ikigai is essentially asking yourself 4 questions. And where the intersection to those 4 questions happen, that apparently is your Ikigai, or your meaning to life. And the questions are, what are you passionate about? Where do your strengths lie? What does the world need? And how can you get paid for it? So essentially, all those years back when I was in London, I without knowing it, came across my ikigai. I decided to get involved in the travel industry. I became an adventure tour leader. My mum actually sent me an advert for this job, which is how I discovered it. And before I knew it, in the year 2000, I headed off to Egypt and began my first tour leading contract in Egypt. I did not return to the UK till about 14 years later. So I transitioned into this nomadic existence where I went from one contract to another contract to another contract, and very much fell into this beautiful flow of travel life and nomadic existence. I did pop back to the UK for a week here or there just to reconnect with family, but I just fell in love with the opportunity that I'd afforded myself to really immerse myself in different cultures and different places and different landscapes and different energies. And what I learned over those years, as well as all the skills that I developed from the actual job, was how travel humbles you. And it's the best education you can ever get, I feel. And it really reminds you of the opportunities that are available. It really inspires a lot of gratitude, I think, for what you have each time you come back home or you see your family again. And there were just these experiences that I had over those 14 years that took me to a lot of those 70 different countries that transformed me in a way. And I do believe that travel can be one of the most transformational tools that there is. And I have to thank travel for giving me a lot of the skills that I have now today. So maybe a bit of a long-winded answer, but that's how I got involved.
Oh, it's great though. It's great to hear. And what I love about it is you're talking about traveling, but you're not a tourist, if you will. You're getting immersed in understanding and spending some time. And I think that's really important. I mean, I've had the opportunity to study abroad and spend, obviously travel as a tourist, but spend years at a time abroad in different countries. And to your point, I think that really changes you and how you see the world and how you experience it. And I've actually really tried hard. Well, their mother and I have tried really hard to do that with my kids, and they've been in different parts of Europe and Asia and North America, and it's life changing.
Definitely. I think it's an amazing way to open one's eyes. And I think if you start at an early age, even better, just to experience different ways of living and being. And it makes you, I think, a lot more tolerant generally, and understanding and compassionate. And, those are all the qualities that we want to develop really throughout our lives. So for me, I mean, obviously there's different ways of developing a lot of personality traits and understandings for when you get older. But I honestly found that travel gave me most of them. And I think also the biggest thing that I found about travel was that it really pushed you into the unknown and out of your comfort zone. Like every time I went to a new destination, I was almost going in there blind. I had no idea what to expect, which is something I also love about not having any of those expectations. It means you go into a place almost sort of childlike and curious in a way, and you can't compare it to anything else. And it's just that's a wonderful place to be. I think, when we were young, everything was exciting and new, and we would learn from it and grow from it. And as we get older, we start comparing. And so I love these different cultures and opportunities. So my first tour leading contract was Egypt, Israel, and Jordan, which was fascinating. Wow. It was 3-week tours in each of those different destinations. And as you can imagine, the culture, and ending up in Jerusalem, for example, where all of those cultures was so important for that one city. And being a tour leader, it meant that I also had to educate myself about the countries that I was traveling through. So I needed to be able to brief my clients on the history and the culture and the religion and the food and, everything to do with those particular destinations. So I really did learn a lot about the places that I was going through. And then my second contract was Nepal, India, and Tibet. So again, very, very different culturally. And then I moved on to South America. So every new place that I went to would throw me into the unknown again, would push me out of my comfort zone. And I loved those challenges. And I found that I thrived when I pushed myself and I challenged myself. And that's definitely a theme that I've noticed thread everything that I've gone on to do later on in life.
It strikes me as a really critical theme for a modern individual. And what I mean by that is I'm doing my doctorate. I'm doing it around human ingenuity, clever, inventive, and original thinking. What I find is that we are so focused on process and to your point that we lose our childlike desire for discovery or ability to deal with ambiguity or the unknown. And the world is changing so quickly now, and we're putting ourselves behind the eight ball if we don't rediscover how to think in the face of ambiguity, in the face of uncertainty, in the face of difference. And the way you're describing travel, and I guess I've always internalized it because I said I've always done it, but it's really getting to the heart of what we need to be to become explorers and I don't know, productive people today, if that's the right way to say it.
Definitely. I mean, I think COVID proved that, didn't it? Just, that threw all of us into this complete chaos and unknown. And I think the beautiful thing to come out of COVID, obviously there was so much destruction and devastation, but I think we all realized actually how adaptable we can be as human beings, in little ways. And that's, I think, the thing with life, isn't it? That, we might have a goal, we might have our destination, but we're constantly going to have to readjust the path as we go, depending on outside situations and changes that are going to happen around us in our environment. There's going to be so many things that we're never going to be able to control. So all we can do is really just concentrate on what we can control and sort of adjust and do the best that we can, given the challenges and the unknown that we will constantly face.
And for me too, I mean, it's about becoming comfortable with the abnormal. And I understand everybody coming out of COVID and before, we're looking at the new normal or the next normal. We're looking to level set and find clarity. And I get it. It's been bizarre, but I still go with the abnormal. And again, having to learn to develop a mindset or the resilience, if you will, to deal with a change, to the swivels that life or business will be bringing forward to us. Because I'm not sure that at the pace of change, there's going to be a normal, for example.
No, I don't think anyone really knows what's going to happen. And that's, I suppose, the thing about challenging oneself and maybe why I've always been drawn to it, because I think it's when you're in that uncomfortable or abnormal situation that you actually learn the most about yourself. And for me, I think it's so important to constantly do that personal development to understand why you react or act in certain situations and where those thoughts are coming from, because those thoughts lead to behaviors, which lead to the actions. And I've just always found anything to do with our minds completely fascinating. Why are we the ways that we are? Is it nature? Is it nurture? How can we develop that mental resilience? How can we learn to be content, in everything that life will throw our ways? And I think that was also another thing about travel that really shone the light for me, was that I would travel through these like incredible destinations, like developing and developed worlds. And, I would see so many different things happening around me, like a lot of devastation, a lot of war-torn places, or conflict, or just disruption, whether it was caused by Mother Nature or it was man-made. And, the people that I came across just had this incredible strength of spirit. And I think sometimes, going through challenges, whether you choose them or you're forced into them, you do develop that resilience, and you do learn about how to deal with the next challenge that's going to come up. And it really shines the light again on that inner strength that I think we all have. And it's just quite often some of us don't get into situations where we have to find it, but I think it's all there. And again, for me, that's maybe why I like to challenge myself, because I want to know where that strength of spirit comes from and how to access it.
So how do you think we can dig deep right now? I mean, because look, I'm pretty A-type. I've been an entrepreneur a long time. I get up in the morning, without any prompting, but these last 2 years have been tough. And they really have been chaotic. And that's, they've been somewhere between chaotic and just outright flattening to a lot of individuals, their health, their families. How do you dig deep coming out of something like this?
Yeah, completely agree with you. It has been very challenging. So I suppose, just to go a step back for a second, this desire that I've always had to challenge myself, and being open to opportunity, led me to this incredible experience that happened about 6 years ago. So I randomly, very, very randomly, came across an advert, again, another advert that seems to sort of happen and take me into a whole new direction. And I became part of the first all-female team to row across the Pacific Ocean. So this was an unbelievable expedition that I immersed myself in. And again, that desire to put myself in a really unknown position and try and find that inner strength. So just to go back and just tell you a little bit about that, because that will help you explain how I actually dealt with COVID, because unbeknown to me, rowing across the Pacific really helped for dealing with a global pandemic. So I was part of a 6-woman team. There were 4 of us on the boat at any one time. We rowed from San Francisco in the US all the way across to Cairns in Australia. It was a 3-stage row, so we made 2 stopovers, one in Hawaii and one in Samoa, where we restocked the boat with food and supplies, and we swapped in 1 team member. So 3 of us rowed the full 9-month journey, because it actually ended up taking us 9 months in total. It was supposed to take 6, but ended up taking 50% longer at 9 months. So 3 of us rode the full 9-month journey, and the other 3 team members rotated in Samoa, in Hawaii and Samoa. And that journey was, as you can imagine, a once in a lifetime experience. It taught me so many things about having to stay in the moment, dealing with things that you can only control. So not worrying about the uncontrollable, because we had unfavorable winds and currents that pushed us in the wrong direction. We would have these days where we would row for 24 hours and we would actually travel backwards. So that demoralizing, just constantly being battered by Mother Nature, essentially. I mean, we were at the mercy of Mother Nature out there. We were as prepared as we could be, but we were in the middle of the ocean. So we were battling the elements, and not only battling the elements, but battling the mental inner demons that each of us went through, because we each dealt with challenges very differently. So the 6 of us came together specifically for this expedition. We didn't know each other beforehand. So we were also having to learn about each other, personality profiling, learning how to work together as a team, building that trust and respect, which I think is the most important things you need to have within a team to really cement that relationship. So I was completely overwhelmed with this expedition. It was like nothing I'd ever done before. So just to let you know, I had never rowed before, ever. And I'll probably never row again. So everything about it was new and unknown and challenging. Coming back from that expedition, there were so many elements of it that I kept with me that ended up helping me when COVID hit. So being out in the middle of the ocean, there was so much monotony and so much challenge. We rode in 2-hour shifts, 2 hours on, 2 hours off, 24 hours a day. So we got into this routine.
For 9 months.
For 9 months. Yeah. We slept in a cabin that was the size of a single bed, essentially, that we shared with one of the other teammates, one of the girls. So 2 of us in this tiny, claustrophobic, cramped space, incredibly uncomfortable. But when COVID hit, obviously you could leave your house from time to time if you wanted to, whereas on the ocean there was nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. So what I found was mentally I needed to start looking for positives wherever I could. What we did was we initiated this exercise where we would each day in our rowing pairs, we would talk about what our daily highlight was. So something every day that made us smile or made us laugh or was just a little bit different to the other monotonous sort of 2-hour shifts that we went through. And it was just that exercise that we started getting into of looking for a positive every day, just constantly looking for those positives. And I think that was something that happened during COVID. You know, we were all forced into this unknown situation. During lockdown, we couldn't leave the house. You know, everyone was challenged in different ways. And I found myself making myself look for the positive every day. And I think there's something to be said for celebrating little successes wherever you can, rather than concentrating on negatives. So not only did that happen out on the ocean, but also during COVID, that was also a tool that I brought with me. It was just trying to find things that I could celebrate, and trying to make that choice to look for the positives all the time. Because I think, you know, there are so many things in life and situations that we can't control, as I mentioned before, but the one thing that we can control is how we react to those situations that we find ourselves in. And so the ocean very much taught me that. It taught me about making that choice. Every time I went out for a 2-hour shift to row again, I reset and I was like, I'm gonna enjoy this 2-hour shift. I'm gonna make the most of it. I'm gonna find something positive about it, whether it's a beautiful sunrise or sunset that I get to experience, whether it's a wonderful debate or entertaining conversation that I have with my rowing partner in that 2 hours, whether it's listening to a song that will transport me back to one of my travel moments. For example, we actually had these this tool that we called PES, or performance enhancing strategy tools, and one of them was listening to music and knowing that music would transport you and shift your mindset really, really quickly. And so for me, music was incredibly powerful. I use music to inject myself with energy when I needed it. So as we said, we rode in these 2-hour shifts, so we would never normally get more than a 90-minute block of sleep at one time. So that getting up, you know, and hearing that alarm and knowing that you had to row for another 2 hours really played tricks on you mentally. So I would set one of my favorite songs, for example, salsa music is always a type of music that makes me want to sort of dance and move my feet. Or so I would set my alarm as a salsa song. So as soon as I heard that alarm, my mind almost went back to like a crowded club in Peru where I would dance salsa, and it would just take me back, and I would wake up a lot quicker than if it was like beep, 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 you know, those really terrible alarm sounds that you can hear. So there were these little strategies that I would use out there that, again, I found really helpful bringing back on land, and especially during COVID. So I think, in answer to your question, we can only really concentrate on what we can control. I think we need to find things that we can inject into our days that we know bring us joy and make us happy. And that will be one of those highlights of the day. And we simply need to take it day by day. Out there on that ocean, it was a case of taking it stroke by stroke, 2-hour shift by 2-hour shift, week by week, leg by leg, breaking everything down into really manageable size chunks. I think that was how I got across those 9 months in that ocean. And that was how I survived the two odd years in COVID, just taking it day by day.
Yeah. Oh, I thank you for that. I think that's great insight. And I think that for most of us in our lives, especially, go to business, but I think we allow ourselves to become overwhelmed because we can't, or we don't separate things into smaller tasks or into smaller issues. And I think that learning to decouple and deal with things one thing at a time, and as you said, look for that positive, look for that little step forward. I mean, in the past, I guess, we'd be looking for major leaps forward, but today, let's just get the boat going forward. to your point.
Exactly.
So I have to ask you, I've never done anything remotely like what you did, but I have been on some 25, 30 plus day canoe trips and whatnot. And I just remember the feeling coming from the north of Canada, and we sort of meandered back to Algonquin Park, which is a major park in Ontario, just north of Toronto, where I am. And I remember the feeling of just stepping out of the canoe for the last time. That sort of surreal, and it was not 9 months, and it was not the Pacific. So, what did that feel like when you finally stepped foot in Australia? And just did the magnitude of what you had done hit you right away, or is it just sort of seep in over time?
Yeah. When I cast my mind back now, I think it definitely took months, if not years, really, to fully comprehend what we did. I think I dealt with that expedition exactly as I've just described to you. It was just, I tried to stay in the moment as much as possible while I was out there. So I wasn't envisaging the end. And when the end actually came, it was, I mean, that's the perfect word that you use. It was just surreal. So my grandmother has always been, she was always very superstitious, and for whatever reason, I became quite superstitious as well. And I always used to remember her saying, if you want to be lucky and anything you want to do, you always need to do it with your right foot forward. You always need to step forward with your right foot first. Sorry, is what she used to say. So if I had an interview or anything like that, she said, don't forget to step out of the house with your right foot forward. And so I told the girls about this, and every time we would step off the boat, we would link arms and we would step off with our right foot first. And that's something that I remember hugging one another on the boat when we arrived in Cairns. We had this incredible welcoming party. There was lots of people that we didn't know. There were people that had found out about our expedition through social media and that had started following the journey and that were based in Cairns and came to see us. And then obviously the most important people were our families that were there. And we could hear them shouting our names, and it was incredibly emotional to actually have arrived in Cairns. And I remember hugging the girls, and then we linked arms and we all stepped off that boat with our right foot first. And anyone that has spent any time on water will know this. You are a little bit wobbly when you first go onto land. So we sort of wobbled our first steps onto land. We got given, in a very Australian manner, a beer, a can of beer was like thrust into each of our hands. And I think the rest, to be honest, was a bit of a blur. That initial few hours, we went straight into like a press conference. Essentially, we were given a platter of fresh fruit, which was amazing. I think someone had asked us what we had craved for, what we really wanted when we first got back on land, and anything fresh was very much at the forefront, because for the 9 months we ate freeze-dried food, so dehydrated food. So anything fresh and cold was incredible. And so we got bombarded with these questions. We were answering these questions, and then we obviously wanted to reunite with our families. So we each separated from ourselves as a team, and we got to spend a little bit of time with our family, which was incredible. And just, hugging and being with those families that we hadn't seen for so long. And then we spent a few days in Cairns in Australia, which, to be honest, I can't remember at all. They were a complete blur. We were separated with our families, and then we reunited as a team to fly back to the UK. We had more press and PR and media when we got back to the UK. And then I almost went into my own bubble for a few weeks. I moved back home with my parents. I didn't really want to see or speak to anyone. I found the real world quite overwhelming, after being immersed in nature. And there's something so powerful about nature. I think that's also something that comes in with the travel experiences. It's the nature that you get to experience as well, really is an incredible thing. And so just to be bombarded with sounds and smells and people, and so talk about being overwhelmed, that was definitely a feeling that came rushing in. And I think the biggest thing for me was having had such a huge goal and a big purpose that I was working towards suddenly disappear actually threw me into a bit of chaos. Like, I didn't really know what I was doing. And so I decided to just watch a box set. I chose Grey's Anatomy. I literally went from, I think, season 5 to season 12 or 11 or something like that, just devouring episode after episode after episode. And after that, I felt like I was ready to move back into the world. The other girls actually went straight back to work. So that must have been really quite discombobulating for them.
Right.
Whereas at least I had that time almost to decompress and then put myself back together and then go back out there into the world. So it was strange, and it definitely took a long time before the enormity of what we'd actually achieved to
sink in.
I don't know if it ever really will sink in. Whenever we get together as a team, even if it's just a couple of us, I've just come back from South Africa, from Cape Town, where I spent some time with Lizanne. She rode the second leg of the journey with us. And whenever we get together, it's always like, did we actually do that? It's a strange feeling. But yeah, there's a knowing. There's definitely a knowing.
So Natalia, I think that one of the next things you're going to be taking on is a completion of a book. Tell us a little bit about that.
That's right. So during COVID, obviously put a stop to a lot of things and just gave me an opportunity to stop myself and reflect. And I think reflection is so important. I've kept a diary or a journal since 1990, actually. So for almost over 3 decades. And I love that, stopping and that reflecting. Being on the ocean for 9 months gave me a long time to reflect. And because of my travels and my experiences, I find it fascinating that we're given all of our experiences in life in the order that we're supposed to have them. And this insight, when I stopped and reflected on everything I've done and how all of those dots joined, made me think that I really want to share the story. And I think my story is really a collection of many different journeys. And so I decided that I'd like to write a book, which I've just finished my very rough first draft. And it literally has become a collection of journeys. So I talk about, obviously, the Pacific expedition, which is the thread that will run through the whole book. And then I am interspersing it with all the other journeys and experiences that I've been very fortunate to have had, and how they connect and how they taught me really valuable personality traits and develop strengths in me that helped me deal with that 9 month, just under 9,000 miles oceanic odyssey. And so that's what I'm doing at the moment, and hopefully sort of interjecting different tools and tips for everyone else that reads it to implement into their own lives and dealing with their own Pacific as well. So that's been an exciting project, and it's ongoing, and I look forward to finishing it.
Oh, that's great. Congratulations on that. And it, going back to one of the discussions earlier, about how to take things out of COVID, how to look for small bright spots. I mean, it really did obviously it was, it's hard to talk about such a terrible time as one of potential or optimism, but it gave a lot of us a lot of time to reflect and understand who we are and where we should go. And I'll be honest, I mean, this whole platform came out of pure boredom. And I just started saying to people, hey, it's as you did, decades and decades of meeting people around the world. Let's talk to some of the really clever ones and ones doing things differently. And here we are. So it's been a pleasure speaking to you. I wish you all the best for the book and the next steps in your journey.
Thank you so much. Thank you.